On a British Airways flight from Johannesburg, a middle-aged, well-off white South African woman found herself sitting next to a black man. Being quite upset about the situation, she called for the cabin crew attendant to voice a complaint. "What seems to be the problem, madam?" asked the attendant. "Can't you see," she says, "you set me next to a kafir." "I can't possibly sit next to such a disgusting human." "Find me another seat," the woman demanded. "Please calm down, madam," the flight attendant replies. "The flight is very full today, but I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go and check to see if there are any seats available in club or first class." The woman gives a snooty look at the outraged black man beside her, not to mention many of the surrounding passengers. A few minutes later, the flight attendant returns with good news, which she delivers to the lady, who cannot help but look at the people around her with a smug and self-satisfied grin. "Madam, unfortunately, as I suspected, economy is full. But I've spoken to the cabin services director and club is also full. However, we do have one seat in first class." Before the lady has a chance to answer, the flight attendant continues. "It is most extraordinary to make this kind of upgrade. However, and I have had to get special permission from the captain. But given the circumstances, the captain felt that it is outrageous that someone should be forced to sit next to such an unpleasant person." With that, she turns to the black man sitting next to the woman and says, "Sir, if you'd like to get your things, I have a seat ready for you in first class." I thought you'd like that. At which point, the surrounding passengers stood and gave a standing ovation while the black guy walked up to the front of the plane. I realize that this story addresses a number of issues, the loudest being racism and classism. I could have even touched upon the subject of redemption, as we see the black man being ushered to the front of the plane to join the first class seaters after he had been dehumanized by this woman. But I really wanted to look at the selfish behavior of the woman. This cantankerous woman could not see past her own ignorance to see this man as a valuable member of the human family. Isn't this what's wrong with our world today? Pure, unadulterated selfishness. Now hang on, we're going to end on a good note, I promise you. But pure selfishness, I believe some have even overdosed on it. Surely this is the kind of selfishness where one places one's own interest above the well-being of others. Extreme selfishness is void of empathy. It justifies the choices and suppresses the emotions. Here, there's only one person in the center of the universe, me, and everyone else is but an object to serve my pleasures. People become means to achieving one's goals, at the top of which is the pedestal for the ego. And many of such goals may even sound quite noble from the distance. Surely most of us try to avoid this degree of self-centeredness, if for no other reason than not to appear vain and conceited, uncaring and unloving. We can recognize this type of self-centeredness. Surely we know someone who, for personal gain, has left their trail of wreckage and betrayal. We may have even been their victims, or in some cases been the perpetrators. And it seems more often than not that this selfishness is rampant and has taken a permanent stronghold in our nation and world. This is how it works. This is how the world works. Survival of the fittest, we often hear. And believe it or not, much of the blame for this current situation has been attributed to intellectuals. In his essay, Self Matters, But Not That Way, renowned professor of psychology Eugene M. DeRobertis asserts there is great criticism being leveled at humanism, particularly at its emphasis on the self. Humanism is being accused of having contributed to selfishness in American culture. On the one hand, we have this extreme selfishness pervading American culture and conscience. And on the other hand, we have mainstream religions encouraging their followers to live selfless lives. And when we think of what selflessness means, we think of people like Gandhi, Mother Teresa, and St. Francis of Assisi, or writers such as C.S. Lewis, who stated, "Give up yourself and you will find the real self." Modern philosophers like Eckhart Tolle have taught us how to avoid the selfishness of ego while embracing the selflessness of being. And we are thankful for such great men and women who live very exemplary lives. But knowing about the struggles of selfishness in modern society, I wonder if the notion of selflessness is truly a realistic one. Because isn't it sort of a contradiction to think that a self can do something selfless? Because self is always present. There's always something self is getting out of something self is doing. It begs the question, less of self means more of what? Think about that for a little bit. Less of self means more of what? So I don't know about you, but I don't buy entirely into this selflessness notion, because I have lived this journey for far too long. Some of my earliest memories were on the road of selflessness. And I believe that such a position could have been detrimental to my emotional and psychological development. I recall a passage from the Bible, if you bear with me now, I'll mention the Bible, where it states, "All that is in the world is the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life." I was told that this meant that I should resist everything that had to do with self. I was to resist the temptations of the flesh or anything that was not spiritual, to avoid earthly pleasures, and to, above all things, avoid relying on self. Don't drink, don't smoke, don't play cards, don't curse. I couldn't even watch movies, and if I did, it had better be Bambi or something to that effect. Don't taste, don't speak, don't touch, don't hear, don't see, don't feel. Aren't these the senses? And isn't this what makes us human? In essence, I was being told not to be human. And it was all reinforced with my attempting to be more like Christ. But I don't know about you, but I don't know of one person who has ever walked on water. I know a few who think they can. And some who have taken up serpents in their ceremonies didn't come out alive. I, at some point, came to the realization that I would never be like Christ or any other God or human for that matter. Because if I am not myself, then who am I? What I'm saying is that we must first discover and recover who we are outside of religious context and also outside of any preconceived notions of what self is supposed to be. It is possible that the real problem in our world is that so many have lost their sense of self or their self-complex and have, by religious and philosophical default, adopted a God complex. That is, they are too heavenly minded to be any earthly good, too spiritual to embrace the natural inclinations and desires, or too transcendent to even care. It is only to be surmised that if you feel that you don't belong to the earth, you will not take care of it. And I know that there are some who are in constant conflict with themselves. the perceived self and the actual. This struggle creates a cognitive dissonance within. And by not knowing what to do with oneself, they try to avoid being even alone with oneself. I know people who continually try to sabotage their relationships because they can't love or forgive themselves and therefore can't understand how it is that someone else could love them. I don't love me, so how is it possible that you love me? Can I keep it real? If you don't like you, how in the world can you genuinely love anyone else? If you do not value and respect yourself, how will you authentically value and respect others? This is why I believe that the golden rule no longer works. The one that says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Really? Please don't treat me like you're treating you. Because if you don't like me, I want you to love me. I think the platinum rule is far better. Do unto others as they would want done unto them. Let me tell you how I want to be treated. First, start with recognizing me as a human being, worthy of love, respect, and dignity. So again, both of these conditions, self-worship on one hand and self-abandonment on the other, seem to be extremes of a continuum. The continuum that measures the self against the rest of the world. But both of them, each for different reasons, construct an illusion, a manipulated version of reality. Both have serious issues with the nature and art of being self. Both are out of balance. And what we need is balance. What I know is that I have come from one extreme and I am determined not to end up at the other. And although selfishness is a real problem, it is not, in my opinion, the result of responsible humanist pedagogy. Rather, the hedonistic and narcissistic self-worship is being fueled by pop culture, pop psychology, and above all, consumerism. Addressing consumerism, D. Robertus says, the United States marketing machines alone are able to communicate to our youth that they need to have a certain kind of phone, a certain kind of jeans, a certain kind of body size if they are to be considered cool, desirable, and good looking and so forth. Moreover, the implicit message in these advertisements is that being cool and desirable is of prime importance. He further states, the constant pressure to adhere to external standards of adequacy and desirability stands in the way of healthy personality integration. Again, we need balance. Since I have been hanging out with humanists, atheists, and agnostics, I've learned a few things. First, I learned the difference between self-actualization and self-gratification. I believe that the idea of self that humanism embraces could in fact redeem the world. It is not the cause of our problems, for ours is not a rugged individualism that suggests one must learn to make it on his or her own, apart from one another. Ours does not embrace the strands of libertarianism that suggest the survival of the fittest. It is not the hedonistic idea of maximum pleasure over responsibility. In fact, in true self-awareness, we become more aware of others and learn to positively respond to them. Because we understand that those who do not value themselves will certainly devalue others. Those who do not know their own place in the world will make certain others know that they don't belong. Because we understand, since humans are the source of most of the world's problems, we must also be the solution. And that source and solution does not lie without, but it is deep within each one of us. And if we are self-centered, then ours must be the type of centeredness that enjoys and acknowledges its connection and interrelatedness to the whole and to all of life. D. Robertus asserts, being one's real self means realizing one's particular talents and living in accord with one's uniqueness within a context of interpersonal relatedness. He writes further, when we feel most ourselves, we sense that we are unified wholes. I contend our individual selves are only as complete as they are actualized in community. We do not contend that any one of us is of greater value than anything or anyone else. We realize that our value, while not determined by others, is only realized in relation to others. We all count, and we all share in the greatness of the universe. Many in this community have learned how to embrace the real self. Most of us are not ashamed and don't mind using the word self as a prefix to who we believe we are. We pride ourselves in embracing and owning the life-changing attributes such as self-determination, self-awareness, self-actualization, self-assurance, self-sufficiency, self-reliance, self-affirmation, self-critique, and self-confidence. The majority of the problems in today's world arise from an unhealthy relationship between ourselves and everything else. We must find that delicate balance. But maybe instead of viewing the self and the world as two negatively correlated values that are mutually exclusive, we need to adopt an integrated view where the self and the world may no longer be at odds, because the self is finally an integral part of the world. So the point I'm making is this: do not avoid looking at self. Rather than following the path of selfishness, follow the path of self-fullness. Self-fullness. The real self, or the actualized self, does not try to empty itself of its sense of humanity and natural inclinations, but rather it recognizes its fullness and allows that fullness to overflow to all areas of life. Self-fullness is conducive to selfhood. It is a way of being. It transcends the conceptualized self in one's mind by the positive way it shows up in the world, thus changing it. When it comes to forgiveness, it should not be selfless forgiveness, but rather self-full forgiveness. Not thoughtlessness, but rather thoughtfulness. Not lifeless, but life full of hope, joy, and care, full of knowledge, grace, and wisdom. Those whose lives are half empty, consistently search, but never find the sense of ultimate fulfillment. Emerson describes it as a foolish consistency, which he states is a hobgoblin of little minds. We must allow our minds to continue to be open and to explore the greater possibilities that lie within us. I've struggled with my identity in the past, but at some point I looked in the mirror for the first time and recognized the man that was looking back at me. And what I discovered was that I like me. I really like me. Me too. And it's not vanity, it's acceptance. At some point, I realized that I belonged to this great earth, and I am indeed a valuable member of the family of all souls. And it happened when I stopped trying to change things without and look within. Who said it? We know that when we change, the world changes. I think Rumi echoed something similar when he said, yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, I am changing myself. Growing up, I recall my mother's saying to me sometimes when I was a little mannish. I dated myself with that word, I know. She would say, oh, You're full of yourself. And she didn't know the half of it. But nor did I. But now I can say for certain that I am full. I can go even further and say I enjoy being full of myself, not out of conceit, but acceptance. Because if you're not full of yourself, you might be full of something else. That something needs to be flushed. Because if it's not you, it isn't real. And I want to be real and authentic. This community has helped me to strike that delicate balance between faith and doubt, between spirit and reason, between self-care and caring for others. You know, for ministers, it is easy to lose ourselves in caring for others. But now I have learned to respect boundaries. And I've learned how to practice self-care, to take some me time. I hope you all get some me time. It was in this community that I learned how to welcome the silence, how to be quiet and alone with myself and my thoughts. And now I'm trying not to go to the extreme about that. You see, sometimes I feel really good about being with myself. I clear the house, turn the lights down low, put on some jazz music and light a candle and enjoy some me. You see, in that fullness, I have learned to be complete, whole, and real. This subject of self is a huge topic. So many people writing about it and so many people trying to get us there. And there are a plethora of ideas, concepts, and theories from east and west concerning the nature of the real self. And it really comes down to this one thing. Who are you? Who is the self you empower? Is that self real and authentic? Only you get to decide. Only you get to determine for yourself. Only you can decide where that ultimate and delicate balance is. And only you can decide how to respond to the extremes at each end of the continuum. Every day we are faced with someone's reality attempting to invade our space. At times we must contend with someone dishonoring our humanity. We must be patient and understanding. We must try to help them to be more conscious of their impact. We must help them and others to become more self-aware, to self-actualize, not to despair or disappear, but to spring forth in the fullness of who they really are. We must help them to understand as a species on this earth, their survival is linked to our survival and ours to theirs. We must help them and others to know their own value and worth, to love and accept themselves as well as those who are seated next to them. The woman on the plane couldn't see her neighbor's humanity because she had never fully embraced her own. I say charity starts at home. Fully and completely love yourself. And out of that fullness, love others. Know thyself. And from that knowing, share your gifts with the world. I am a living witness that there is a freedom that comes from that. I have found that there's nothing holding me back from being me, the authentic me. I know how it feels to be full and free, complete without lack, to be completely whole and full of myself. But I would like to ask you, what are you full of today?